So, now someone in the class said, thinking about getting rid of my TI BA2 Plus, and her heart was pure. She was going to do it charitably, hand it on to another poor person who had to suffer through this.
Yeah.
Bad idea, and here's why. And she said, well, give me an example of when I'll need it. You go to buy a car, and you're going to do the financing at the car lot. Even if you don't know, if you've forgotten how to use your TI BA2 Plus, if you whip that thing out in front of the financing guy, he's highly less likely to try to cheat you. So here's what they'll do. They'll give you, the price of the car, they'll tell you the payment, and then they'll tell you a lower interest rate. And so then it's a lie detector, right? You do your calculation, you say, wait a minute, Jack, you're actually charging me 7.9%, not 4.9%. Most people are too stupid to know. They just hear the 4.9%, and it's all good, right? They feel good, the finance guy. By the way, does the finance guy have latitude in the interest rate that he charges you? Yeah! In fact, the screen, in fact, GMAC got in trouble for this because they put in your information and the screen pops up with, you can loan money to this person at 4.5%. And the person says, I can do a great deal for you. And you're like, whoa, tell me. He's like, 5.9%. And you're like, yay! And then he gets a bonus based on how much he hoses you. Did you know that? They get a bonus based on how much they owes you. And so it turns out that GMAC was doing this to certain segments of our population more than others, right? They were totally ripping off this one group of people and not ripping off other groups of people. And so they actually got into a civil rights problem over the whole thing. They got sued over it. So you can go, GMAC isn't around anymore. They died in the bankruptcy of 2008 or whatever. Anyway, my point to you is this. Even if you don't know how to use it, as soon as you pull out your calculator at the car dealer, do you think it lowers the bullshit level? It does, it does. And the reason I know this is a colleague of mine, poor guy, he was buying a minivan. If you don't know, minivans mean you've basically given up on life, right? So he's buying a minivan, and they give him all of these numbers, and then he whips at his calculator, and the guy starts crawfishing. Do you know what crawfishing is? Yeah. Guy starts crawfishing. He's like, oh. And he ended up basically with a $1,500 lower present value of payments as a result of having whipped at his trusty TI BA2 Plus. Now, you say, wait a minute, I don't know how to use it. If you see someone walk into the pool hall and they bring their own stick, what do you immediately think about them? Yeah, they're good, right? Because people like me don't have their own stick. And so as a result, would you be more or less likely to try to play them for money?
Oh, less.
Less, exactly. So you're going to bring in your stick, right? They're going to be less likely to try to play you for money. Does that make sense?
It's a good one,
You going to keep it? I appreciate...
I still can get the app on my phone.
It's really not the same, because when you go in, this thing is instinctual. When you see it, it's kind of like thinking that you have a taser app on your phone, It's just not the same as laying a taser on the desk. By the way, try not to get tased. I saw a guy that was stealing a gallon of gasoline, and the cops tased him, and he burst into a ball of flames. Yeah, that's rough. Okay, let's get to work here. Last time we were talking about the general decision to replace, and we said that machines get old and worn out, and what happens to the maintenance costs as the machine gets older? Yeah, it goes up. And we said that eventually those maintenance costs are going to be so high that they will justify replacing the old machine with a new machine. And we said you could get predictive maintenance numbers from the maintenance department, but we know that the maintenance people will try to lie to keep the numbers low, so you're less likely to replace the machine, and we went into that. But I did not tell you about the other group you could talk to. And those are engineers. Engineers have the same manuals for the machine. They have everything else. They could come up with their estimates. Now, here's what you need to know about engineers. We love new machines, right? New machines smell. By the way, if you don't realize it, manufacturing equipment starts to smell like rotten eggs, especially metal machining equipment. It smells like rotten eggs after about 6 months. But if you can smell a brand new machine, it still smells like machine oil. Oh, it's beautiful for engineers, right? So what are engineers going to do? They're going to want you to replace the machine, and so the numbers they give you are probably going to be higher than they should be because they're trying to push you along to get the new machine so they can install it, right? Now, what do? We got a group of liars that are lying this way, and we got a group of liars that are lying this way. I have both sets of numbers. What should I do? Average them, right? Average them. Now, it's still not going to be the truth. It's still going to be a scientific wild ass guess, but at least you're going to be closer than if you just went with one or the other. Okay, now what I said, in order for us to figure out when to replace this, what we're going to do is first look at the new machine. And I want to point out, I don't know how people miss this. The top bullet point here is the new machine. The bottom set of data is for the old machine. So write old machine over this table. Old machine is over the table. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out the equivalent annual cost of the replacement machine. What am I going to do? What's the first button I'm going to hit on my calculator? Mr. Bowrichter, what button should I hit first on the calculator?
CF.
Very good. CF, second, clear work. Now, these are all, so we say it costs $9,000 and it requires $1,000 per year in maintenance. Do those have the same sign or different signs?
Same.
Yeah, they got the same signs because it's money flowing out, right? Okay, so we're going to put in 9,000 for CF0. Enter. Arrow down. Now, C01. What do I put for C01? Yeah, 1,000. Enter. Okay, now, it says, there's one more thing that I didn't read. Salvage value is 2,000 at the end of life. Is that going to be a cash inflow or outflow? Yeah, it's going to be an inflow. And we assume this is the after-tax salvage value, right? Okay, now let's go to arrow down. And we are going to have to do, come on, arrow down. What should I do for F01? Most people say 8, but actuality, the answer is, Ms. Minnis?
7.
7.
Or you subtract the 2,000.
Yeah. I knew she would know. She had that look on her face. You turn bright red every time I brag on you. You need to work on that, right?
Yeah, turn red a lot.
Yeah. So when people compliment you, you're like, you should be like, yeah, instead of being embarrassed, right?
I don't feel embarrassed, it just happens.
Interesting. I'm sorry for I
That's
don't
okay.
I don't have a good recommendation for that.
I know.
Maybe stop drinking. I don't. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. She has seemed totally sober most days of our class, so I don't even know why I said that. Okay, so she's absolutely right. It's 7. Enter. Arrow down. Now, as Ms. Minnis pointed out, in that last year, we've got 1,000 flowing out, and in our little situation here, we're saying positive is out. And that 2,000 is negative because it's going the other way. What is 1,000 plus minus 2,000? Mr. Fisher? Negative 1,000. Very good. Enter. Okay, so we have all that squared away. What should I do next? Mr. Taylor.
We're gonna go get the I, so we're gonna get I,
Okay, well, you're skipping a step. What button do I have to hit first?
down, or sir?
Oh, we can, if you like. There we go. We know that F02 is going to be 1. What button do I hit next? How do I get I to pop up on the screen? Mr. Russell, welcome. Come on, say it. I know you've got it. It is MPV. Very good. Now, we know that the required return is 15%. And we're going to use that on both of these. And so I'm going to say 15, enter. And then I'm going to arrow down and compute. Now I have $12,833 and 52 cents, right? Okay, so this represents the present value of all the cash flows related to that machine. How are we going to turn that amount of money into an equivalent annual cost? Where am I going to put this number right here?
Cost payment, equivalent annual cost.
Okay, yeah, we're trying to get to the equivalent annual cost. How are we going to do it?
Isn't the payment that we do every year? Or store?
Yeah, so that's the first thing we're going to do. In case everything goes horribly wrong, store 1. And then we're going to hit clear twice. Now that number is all by itself. Where are we going to put this? Present value of the time value money keys, but there's something we need to do first. What is it? Second, clear TVM. Now I'm going to put in present value, and then I need to put in a number of years. What should I put in? 8. Very good. Now that is the life of the machine. Don't get confused and think you need to do 7 there. Okay, what should I put in for I per Y? 15. I per Y. And then what should I compute? Payment. Very good. I'm getting, so the EAC of the new machine is equal to $2,859.95. Is that right? Okay, so what we're going to do with that number is we're going to compare against it every year of the life for the old machine. And in the first year in which it will be cheaper to get the new machine, in other words, that the cost of holding on to the old machine is more than $2,859.95, we are going to replace the machine at the beginning of that year. Because after all, we would rather pay less than more, right? That's basic. Okay. Now, let's look at the old machine and see what's going on there. So, right now, time 0, I could go out and sell that machine for $4,000. Let's talk about where you get these salvage values. Do you remember my machine dealer, Rusty? I could call Rusty and I'd say, hey, Rusty, what would you give me for this machine? And he would say, yeah, I'll give you $4,000. And then, how do I get year 1? I could say, well, what if I kept the machine and ran it for 2 shifts, 8 hours per shift, and I'm cutting aluminum. I have to tell him what I'm cutting because steel, if cutting steel is harder on the machine, it wears it out sooner, right? So what if I did that? And he'd say, well, I might give you $2,500. And then I play the game with him again for the next year, and he starts to get a little anxious and upset with me, right? Because the further out you go, the more he's kind of hanging himself out there to give me a number. And by the time I get to asking him about year 4, he says, I wouldn't give you a damn thing for it, which is how we got 0, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's the 1994 way to do this. If you scroll forward to the current time, that way is still totally possible. But what we could do instead is go out to this new thing called the internet. And we could look for machines. It's always amazing when you are in the factory or wherever you're at and you've got this piece of equipment and you always assume that yours is one of a kind, it's very special, right? It's not like with cars where you can see the other Mustangs on the street, right? And so then when you go to the internet and you start looking at machine dealers online, you notice that lots of people have the exact same machine as you. They've got ones the age of your machine, they've got ones a year older, they've got ones 2 years older, 3 years older, 4 years older. So here's what I would do if I were you. I would go out there and look at the price of machines like mine at current, and I'd take about 80% of that value. And here's why. The dealer has to make money, right? And so you're not going to be able to sell for the same price as the dealer. And then you've got those other years, you just look for machines that are 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years older than yours, take 80% of that, and that would be your guess. Now I'm going to tell you one more weird thing about salvage value. Sometimes salvage values, estimated salvage values, actually go up. So I had this machine. It's a machine for making big round things, and it was bigger than anything that I needed. And so it's kind of surplus, and so I call Rusty. And I'm like, Rusty, what will you give me for this? It's called a lathe. What will you give me for this lathe? He said, I'll give you 50,000 bucks for it. And I say, okay. And so, but I didn't make any decision then. I was kind of sitting on it. And then in the morning meeting, they tell us that ExxonMobil has made a huge discovery of natural gas off the west coast of Australia. And the way that they're going to access this is by drilling bigger holes than have ever been drilled before in the history of the oil industry. Now, the stuff that I was making goes down in the hole. And the bigger the hole is, the bigger my stuff has to be. Well, now that they're drilling bigger holes, it means I need bigger stuff. And I'm like, whew, it's a good thing I didn't sell that machine to Rusty. And so I get on the phone. I say, hey, Rusty, I need another one of those machines that I said, you remember that machine? And he's like, yeah, hey, are you available to sell? I said, no. I said, in fact, I'm looking to buy another. He says, well, I might be able to help you out there. He says, it'll be $200,000. I'm like, hey, pal, you told me mine was worth 50. He said, yeah, let me guess, you're working on that deal off Western Australia. He says, yeah? And I said, yeah. And he says, so's everybody else. Right? So what happened to the used machine value as soon as that word came out that we were going to have to make bigger stuff? Bigger used machines just whoop, shot up in value. And keep that in mind later on when I tell you my modification to what the textbook tells you to do here. Here's what the textbook tells you to do. They tell you to look at each and every year. And the first year in which it's more expensive to keep the old machine than buy the new one, they tell you to buy it. Now, if it happens in the first year, my thing and their thing is exactly the same. But they would tell you that if the first year that happens is in year 4, that you should just make a note on your calendar, right? Replace machine 237 and just forget about it, right? That doesn't take into account the fact that these salvage values can change. And it also makes you try to forecast further out in the future. We know that forecasted numbers out further in the future are worse, right? Okay, so let's get going here, and let's look at what is the price, what is the cost of holding on to it for one more year. So now we're going to put ourselves at time 1, and we see that the maintenance for time 1 is $1,000. So far, so good. Now, what could I do at the end of year 1? I can sell it. How much am I going to get? $2,500. And so far, it's looking like negative $1,500. That's actually really small, right? But there's one thing we've got to think about. Do you remember the idea of opportunity cost? What did we have to give up at time 0 to be able to hold on to the machine for one more year?
4,000.
Yeah, we had to give up $4,000. But it's not just $4,000. It's $4,000 and the interest we could have earned on it. And so we're going to multiply that by 1.15 because we have a 15% required rate of return here. And so this actually comes out to be $4,600. 1,000 plus 4,600 is 5,600. Minus 2,500 tells us it is $3,100 to hold on to the new machine for one more year. Hold on to the old machine. I've erased it already. Oh, here it was. The equivalent annual cost of the new machine was $2,859.95. Which would you rather pay? This or that? Oh yeah, So what does that mean? Should we replace the machine or should we keep it? Yeah, we go ahead and pull the trigger and replace it. Now, what if, let's just pretend for sake of argument that this came out to be, say, $2,700. What the book says is now we go on to the next year, and we know we've got $2,000 in maintenance, and at the end of the year, we could sell that machine for $1,500. If I make a mistake, please let me know. But what did we have to give up at time 1 in order to keep the machine till time 2? Yeah, we had to give up $2,500, and not only that money, we had to give up the interest on that money. So can someone tell me what 2,500 times 1.15 is? 2875, thank you. So 2875 plus 2,000 is 4875, minus 1,500 is 3375. And once again, that's greater than 2859.95. And we could just keep going there, doing the same pattern over and over again. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Instead of doing that, here's what I think we should do. I think we really only need to gather numbers for 2 times. Time 0 and time 1. And that means we're only forecasting 1 year out in the future, so our swag is going to be more accurate than trying to go out 4 years. And every year, then, we go through and we look at time 0, time 1, and if we figure out, by the way, do you think the price of the new machine could change too? Yeah. And do you think with the improvement of technology that the new machine might actually become cheaper? Oh yeah. Right now I'm looking at robotic lawnmowers because I'm really lazy. And in the beginning, robotic lawnmowers were like $3,000-4,000 a piece. And now they're around about $900. And so I'm watching the Black Friday deals, right? So, and last year I watched them, I'm like, whoop, not cheap enough yet, right? But this year, maybe. So my point to you is this. Not only are we going to regather the values for the old machine, which might have changed due to the salvage value change in machine, because of machine demands for machines, we're going to also redo the new machine. And as a result, we'll have a much better analysis on whether or not we should replace the machine. Now, if your analysis says to replace the machine, you go ahead and do it. If it doesn't, then you make a note in your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar it is you use, make sure it's electronic, that says redo analysis, replace machine 237, right? And then it just reminds you every year. And bonus of this process is that you don't make Rusty nearly as mad because you're only asking him to look into the future 1 year. You're not asking him to look out years 3, years 4, right? Questions? Can anyone explain to me why C01 was only 7 and not 8? Ms. Wabi?
No idea.
No idea. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Let's see, Mr. Umfleet.
Because we added salvage value to the last one.
Yeah. So we had the initial, Ms. Wabi, close attention, please. We had the initial cash outflow, right? And then we did have that $1,000 cash outflow for 8 years, but there was another cash flow that happened in year 8. What was it? This is for the new machine. Okay, I'll give you a hint. Do you see the number 9,000? Okay, do you see the number 1,000? What's the other number?
2,000?
2,000! So we get a 2,000 salvage value in year 8. That's why that cash flow is different, because it's 1,000 outflow minus the 2,000 inflow from selling the machine.
Gotcha.
You got it now?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Questions? And the reason I ask that question is because always after the class, someone sends me an email and says, now why was it just 7 and not 8? And that's the answer. And by the way, if you still don't understand it after class, feel free to email me. I won't shame you. Questions? Okay, that's it for chapter 8. hope you're as happy to see it as I am happy to see it go. We're on to chapter 21. Chapter 21 is about mergers and acquisitions, and I love this chapter because it is so full of examples of how people are scumbags. And so, that's like one of my things. So here we go. So, mergers. The basic concept is we start with two or more, usually it's just two, but we start with two or more companies, and we're going to wind up with one. So let's talk about some vocabulary here. By the way, all of this happens because someone buys someone else. And that's in the end, that's how this is all done. So the bidder is the person that's acquiring is the acquiring firm. They're the ones that are doing the buying of the other firm. And so the firm that they're seeking out, we call the target. The firm that we're seeking out, we call the target. And then we have the consideration. That is what the bidder is offering to the shareholders of the target in order to be able to get their hands on that company. So, consideration. It could be cash or it could be securities. Most common type of security that is offered is the stock of the bidding company. The most common kind of security that is offered is the stock of the bidding company. And so you'll hear people talk about an all-cash deal, an all-stock deal, or a mixed stock and cash deal. It's always the stock of the bidding firm that they're talking about. Now, we're going to talk about, everything we talk about in this chapter is going to be a takeover. And takeover is kind of an imprecise term, but it really is talking about how control passes from one group of shareholders to another. So, if a company buys another company, now those shareholders of the target company, they're no longer around, especially in an all-cash deal, they're no longer around. And so the control passes from that group of shareholders to the bidding company's shareholders. Let's use an example from the news. Does anybody know who Elon Musk is? Yeah. Elon Musk just paid $44 billion for something.
We just read the homework.
What's that?
We just did the homework.
You just did the discussion? What did he buy?
Twitter.
Twitter! Now, if you didn't know that Elon smoked marijuana before, you should be able to tell now, because he's offered $44 billion for Twitter. And then guess what? He tried to back out of the deal, right?
Yeah.
So what did he? He must have been high when he made the offer and then sobered up and was like, oh crap, what did I do? Right? But now he's kind of stuck with it. Okay, now, did that change? Was that a takeover? Absolutely. Did it change control of the firm? It changed it from the Twitter shareholders over to now Elon is in charge. So that's a takeover. And we're going to talk about different kinds of takeovers. And this is just basically to give you an idea how this family tree looks. We're going to talk about each one of these things in detail. Under takeovers, we have acquisitions. And acquisition is what Elon did. He acquired Twitter. We also have what are called proxy contests. If you remember anything from chapter 6, the proxy, you have the ability to give someone else the right to vote your shares. And so what we're going to try to do in a proxy contest is get people to vote for one set of directors over another. And then in the going private transaction, that's where we basically just buy up all the shares of the firm and take the firm off the market. We call that going private. And so all of these things are going to change the controlling group of shareholders from the target shareholders to either an individual or a group of individuals or another group of shareholders. Now, under acquisitions, we have merger, consolidation, acquisition of stock, and acquisition of assets, which are the three things I'm going to talk about next. Now, just like in finance, we call everything, all of these debt instruments, we call them bonds. But then we say, well, actually underneath there, we actually have bonds and notes. And so we have all these things that we call mergers, and underneath we have, well, it's actually, those are mergers and consolidations. So don't let that freak you out. Beyond one multiple choice test question, am I going to be too concerned about the concept of consolidation? Ms. Avila says no, and she's right. Okay, let's start with the idea of a merger. And that is where one firm completely absorbs another. A merger that I worked on was between Halliburton and Dresser. And Dresser was a competitor, and for some reason the government let us do that. I have no idea why. Dick Cheney was our CEO, could be, who knows. Back to the story. But hey, wait, Bill Clinton was still president. Not sure how that went down. Back to the story. We're putting these two firms together. In the beginning, there was our beautiful headquarters in Dallas, Texas, said Halliburton on it. And there was a headquarters building for the other company that said Dresser on it. Dresser's not a piece of furniture, that's the guy's name, right? Okay, so then when we finished putting them together, there was only one headquarters. And that headquarters said Halliburton. So our company had totally absorbed Dresser Industries, had totally absorbed it, except for a little piece I'll tell you about later when we talk about split-offs. Okay. Consolidation is when two firms go together to form an entirely new firm. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think in reality there are a whole lot of consolidations. Typically, in these things, there is a straight up winner and a loser. And we'll talk about Daimler, Chrysler. You guys know about Chrysler, hopefully. You remember them from back in the bad old days. They're kind of going away now, aren't they? They only have, do they have any? Oh, they've got the 300M. That's the only thing they've got left. Thank God. Because, you know, where would I get my cars if they didn't make those? Back to the story. So Chrysler is out there, and they're making not the best cars. That's putting it generously. They're making not the best cars. And then there's this other company out there that doesn't have huge share market or market share in North America, and they also don't have huge market share in particularly the lower value market in North America. And so they reach out and they talk about buying or, you know, hooking up with Chrysler. They're going to do this. Merger of equals is what they call it, which is another name for a consolidation. Now, Daimler. What do we know about Daimler? What does Daimler make? Do you know? Yeah, they make Mercedes. Now think about, picture in your head Mercedes, you know, it's a quality car, it's a high value car. Picture in your head the Chrysler Sebring. Could you say either one of those things about that car? No. Okay, so they're saying they're putting this, this is a merger of equals. It's obviously not. And here are two pieces of evidence. Number one, is Daimler Chrysler in alphabetical order? No. And it turns out in the German alphabet, it's not either, right? Number two, at the end, all the people in charge had names like Dieter Zetsche. Is that a good Irish name out of Detroit? No, that's a German. In fact, everybody that ended up in positions of power, for the most part, Germans. So that lets you know that basically this was Mercedes swallowing and absorbing Chrysler. The only thing that stayed out of Chrysler basically was the name was kind of tacked onto the end of Daimler there, right? Daimler Chrysler. By the way, if you're a fan of the Chrysler 300M, and I know most of you are, it's based on a Mercedes E-Class, right? And so even that kind of gangsta ride that we associate with being purely American, Chrysler Detroit Iron, whoop, nope, German. Okay, back to the story. Have any of you ever had food poisoning? So in food poisoning, that there's basically two ways this gets resolved, right? Let's discuss this way. When you've eaten something bad and you throw up, how can you tell what it was that made you sick?
Your senses.
Say again?
Your senses.
Your senses.
You smell.
Okay. Smell it, taste it. it comes out looking pretty much like it did when you swallowed it, right? Your body is smart enough to say, whoo, that's bad, and you throw it up. And I know this from personal experience. I ate at a Hare Krishna vegetarian restaurant in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Oh my goodness, I didn't know you could get sick off vegetables.
Oh, man.
But I did. Okay, back to the story. Why am I telling you this? Because eventually, Daimler goes, bleh, and they throw up Chrysler. And it looks almost identical to what it looked like when they swallowed it, except for now the 300M rolls on an E-Class frame. Boop. Right? Okay. And you can see other things like this too. AOL Time Warner. Back in, you guys aren't young or aren't old enough to remember this, but AOL used to be like the big internet company. Back when we all had to dial in using our telephone line. Oh yeah, she's laughing at me, right? Okay, yeah, and you listen to that happy noise, and then you're like, yeah, I'm connected to the world at 56K, right? It was really slow. But they made a boatload of money, and they went out and they used some of that money. Actually, they didn't use their money. I'll tell you about that when we get to consideration. But they bought Time Warner, a grand, old, solid American company. And the new company was called AOL Time Warner. Time went on, and not the company, but you know.
The time.
Yeah, the timeline moves forward, right? And then AOL just kind of starts to shrink, and the company becomes Time Warner AOL. And then eventually, AOL shrivels up to such a tiny little raisin that doop, Time Warner spits it out, right? And so you can always tell a bad merger because they end in divorce. Now, I'm pretty good at spotting these things that are going to end in divorce, but for some reason, and we're going to see why Richard Roll thinks it is in the hubris hypothesis, for some reason, managers have a blind spot for seeing these bad marriages. Another example, did you know that eBay used to own PayPal? Or still does, right? Or yeah, they only recently split it off. But the even bigger shocker was eBay owned Skype. And here was the rationale for that. Oh, we're going to buy this video conferencing company so our customers can talk to our sellers. I don't go on the internet because I want to talk to some cat lady from Connecticut, right? I want an anonymous transaction. I want to get my stuff and I want to get out. If I wanted to yap with these nut jobs, I would go to garage sales, right? Now, how did that merger end? eBay ends up, bleh, throws up Skype. Skype looks pretty much the same as it did the day that eBay ate it. Now, who comes around and buys Skype later? Microsoft, right? And maybe Microsoft has a better rationale for that. Now, thinking on down the road, is Skype a thing now? What do people do instead? Yeah, we Zoom, right? Okay. So, what I'm getting around to saying is, in practice, we're mostly looking at mergers. I don't know of any good examples of consolidations. So, what are some advantages and disadvantages of mergers? Well, a merger is legally simple. And what do I mean by that? We don't have to transfer the title of the assets. Well, can anyone tell me what a title is? Mr. Scott, do you own a car? Do you have a title for that car?
I do.
What does that title say?
That I own it.
That you own it. So it is a legal document that declares the ownership of the asset. Now, if you do a merger, you don't have to go through and retitle all those assets because after all, one company has swallowed another. And so now the target company just becomes part of the parent company. All that stuff doesn't have to be retitled. We're going to talk when we get to acquisition of assets what a nightmare it can be to retitle assets. So there's a lower cost. And let's talk about now the disadvantages. It has to be approved by a vote of the shareholders of each firm. Now, I say typically greater than or equal to 2/3 of shareholders must approve. And I say typically because in your corporate bylaws, different companies can put out different amounts, right? But they typically require a super majority, meaning greater than 50% plus one. It could be 2/3, it could be 3/4. It's really up to the corporate bylaws. And usually, the super majority is only required if someone's trying to buy us. If we're trying to buy someone else, they only require perhaps the 50% plus one. But of course, once again, it all comes back to the corporate bylaws. Now let's talk about why the target, especially the target management, might want the supermajority requirement for shareholders to approve. Do the managers of target companies want to get taken over? No, why not? Yeah, they're going to lose their job, right? They're going to lose their job, and we'll talk more about that down the road. And so basically, they're going to try to put up what we call defenses to prevent their firm from being taken over. And one of those things they'll do is they'll say, well, let's put it in the corporate bylaws that greater than or equal to 2/3 of the shareholders have to vote. And it's, by the way, it's not really the shareholders, is it? It's the shares. So if I own 3/4 of the shares and I'm only one shareholder, I could still make this happen, right? Because we have one vote per share. Okay. Now, by the way, is it easy to get 2/3 of people to agree on anything? No. Assuming that we had a bunch of shareholders that only had one share piece, your chances of getting 2/3 of them to agree on anything are pretty slim. I think about the presidential elections. The biggest landslide I ever witnessed in my entire life, 1984, Reagan versus Mondale. Reagan got 60% of the vote. Mondale got 40% of the vote. That is the biggest landslide I've ever seen. Was that greater than or equal to 2/3? Absolutely not. And was Reagan a far, far better candidate than Mondale? Absolutely. Mondale stood up and said he was going to raise everybody's taxes. Can you imagine how unpopular that made him? Right. And he still gets 40% of the vote. And so it's really hard to get 2/3 of people to vote on or to agree to anything. And we say obtaining votes might not be easy, as target managers are likely to resist. And we've already talked about why they're likely to resist. And so let's talk about how this process unfolds. So I have been watching Mr. Umfleet's company. Let's call it Umfleet Corp. And so I'm Haggard Corp. And so I start out, and by the way, Mr. Umfleet is the CEO. He's also the founder, but he's no longer the majority shareholder, because along the way he sold his stock so he could buy things like Ferraris and things like that. Okay, now I'm going to reach out and I'm going to say, dear Mr. Umfleet, we at Haggard Corp have been very impressed with your work at Umfleet Corp. And we are so impressed, we would like to make an offer to join our two glorious companies. And then I'll put in the letter about a price per share that we think is fair for his company. Now, Mr. Umfleet, keep in mind, he's down to being a minority shareholder now. He doesn't have super voting rights or anything like that. And so what's he going to do with my letter? What do you think? By the way, what's going to happen to him if I take over his firm? Boop. He's gone, right? Okay, so he's going to open his desk drawer, toss the letter in, shut the desk drawer. Now, what do? What's my response to that? I gave him 2 weeks, which is plenty of time, even given the USPS. In fact, I probably don't even trust those rascals to take this to you, right? I'll have it delivered by hand by a bicycle messenger. Okay, so he doesn't respond. 2 weeks later, what do? I send a similar letter to the board of directors, only I say, recently I contacted your CEO, Mr. Umfleet, regarding perhaps my message was misplaced. However, I want to now share with you the proposal that I made to him. 12 people on the board of directors, 12 people on my board of directors. How do you think his 12 directors are going to react, and why? They're not going to be too thrilled. Why? Oh yeah, but it's not him they're displeased with. They know exactly why he held it, right? What do you think is going to happen to the boards of directors of these two firms? Do you think we need 24 members on the board of directors? No! What's likely to happen is 4 of my directors will agree to retire at the end of their current terms. And maybe for good reason, maybe they're old, who knows? And we are only going to choose 4 of the 12 of Umfleet Corp to come on board with the new board of directors. Is being a director a sweet deal? Yeah. So you get paid way more money than you would think you would get paid for meeting monthly or quarterly, right? There's director and officer insurance that protects you against being sued. And plus you get to hang out with 11 other cool people, right? And where do you have the meetings? Do you think you have the meetings at the Newark Airport? No, if you've ever been to the Newark Airport, you'll know why I chose it. It sucks. It's like the worst place. Well, never mind. Back to the story. I could tell you horror stories about the Newark Airport. Back to the story. So, no, we have our meetings at like Pebble Beach. And this year we're doing the Outer Banks, and next year we're going to Scotland, right? So we have pretty nice places. And by the way, am I making you fly coach to get there? No, you're either going first class or, I know this is a lot of trouble for you, so we're going to send a private jet. Feel free to bring your significant other and 2 pets of your choice, right? And by the way, the significant others all get together and party while we're meeting as a board. So of course the significant others are on board, right? It's all good. Oh, I can't wait to see Miriam again. Last year she made fun of my hat. I'm going to smack her in the mouth. These are the sorts of things that happen. Okay, back to the story. The directors are therefore going to try to ditch this deal too. And so they're going to throw the envelopes also in the trash. And that's going to lead me to do something else. But we'll get to what that is here in a bit. So in other words, not only the managers are going to resist, the board of directors are likely to resist because none of them want to give up this sweet, sweet deal that they've got. People are scumbags. Questions? Oh, and by the way, the stock's currently trading, Umfleet Corp's currently trading for $20 a share. Could I buy the firm if I offered them $18 a share? No, they'd be like nuts. If I want to sell my shares, I can sell for 20 in the market. So what do I have to offer them? Something north of $20, right? And so I'm going to offer 25. What's the goal of financial management? Maximize shareholder wealth. What's more, 25 or 20? What should he be doing to maximize shareholder wealth? Accepting the offer. By rejecting it, is he maximizing shareholder wealth? No. What's he doing? Who are you taking care of, Mr. Umfleet?
Myself.
Yeah, he's taking care of himself because he is what? Human, right? Because that's what we do. That's how we all got here, was by the selfishness of previous generations that passed on their selfish genes to us. Does that make sense? Yeah, if your ancestors back in the cave or whatever were giving away the buffalo meat, you wouldn't be around today. Does that make sense? Okay. Now let's talk about what happens next if we can't get this merger thing to work. By the way, merger is the ideal. We have to undergo something called the acquisition of stock, and that's where we're going to go out and try to buy up the stock on the open market. And of course, we can make offers of cash, shares, or other securities, typically cash or shares. And so what we're going to do is make a tender offer. This isn't like dinner and a movie or anything like that. It's a tender offer, meaning that I am tendering certain things in order to get you to tender your shares or give over your shares. Now, the problem is going to be, oh, by the way, let's talk about what it's contingent on. It's contingent on us getting a minimum percentage of the voting shares. Remember earlier we said that you needed to get likely greater than or equal to 2/3 or greater than or equal to 3/4 of the target shares to vote, right? And so if you want to make sure that this goes your way, that's how many of the shares you want. But typically we say you want to get at least 80%. And here's why. Because the dividends paid by a subsidiary in which we own 80% or more of the shares is considered an intra-organizational cash flow from tax standpoint, and we don't have to pay taxes on those dividends. We say it's what, an unconsolidated subsidiary or something like that. And so in order to save on taxes, what we really want to do is get 80%. And so here's what I'm going to do if I am going to, I'm going to do one of these tender offers right now. And I'll do an example of this. I'm gonna ask you guys to do something really gross, and I'm gonna offer you an amount of money to do it. Are you ready? I want you to go out, and you get to pick the spot. Doesn't have to be where that cat died or anything like that. You pick the spot. I want you to lick the parking lot. $5. I have a bid of $5. Okay, raise your hand if you're up for $5. We know you are, right? $5. Okay, so you notice I only got one with $5. What about 10? 10?
What do you think? Not
Let's
Do
just sit down.
exchange rate, maybe.
Ah! She's thinking about what she can buy back home for $10. Okay. What do you have? Pesos or real?
Yeah.
Pesos. Okay. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm getting. Let's say I've got 2 now. I still don't have enough. How about $20? Do I have any more takers? All right. Yeah. I still don't have enough. What do I have to keep doing to get people to get on board?
increase.
Yeah, I have to keep ratcheting it up. And it's the same way with the firm. First, I offer 25 over here, and he stiff arms me, and so does the board of directors. I go directly to his shareholders, and we'll talk about how you get their information or how you get the word to them. And I'm going to say to them, okay, I'll pay all of you $25 a share. Now, undoubtedly, some of the shareholders will say, yes, I would sell my shares for $25. But let's say that only 55% of them, Ms. Avila, come on, you got to tell us.
We're negotiating exactly how much money Trevor would have to pay me to lick the ground. No, I did not.
She is a woman of extraordinary taste and breeding. I assume it would be at least $100.
That's what she said, and I said, you wouldn't walk outside right now and put your tongue on the sidewalk or the parking lot for $75. She said, yeah, I do.
Ooh, I guess I overestimated you. Okay.
Overestimated.
Okay. Now that we have that settled, and well, thanks for sharing. Now that we have that settled, I'm going to go out to you guys, and I'm going to say $25, and I'm only going to get 55%, let's say. Next, I go 27, right? And I get some more people on board. Now, here's the deal. As an acquiring manager, you have to know what your number is in advance, and that is, what is the absolute most I'm willing to pay for this firm? And here's the reason why. Otherwise, this turns into one of those auctions. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to an auction. So where I'm from, when an old farmer dies, they have what's called an estate sale. And then everybody in the neighborhood shows up for 2 reasons. Number 1, they like cheap stuff. And number 2, they always wanted to see what Widow Hankins had in her house. Something like that, right? And so we show up, and they bring out an ottoman. Not a Turkish person, but the actual piece of furniture, right? They bring out the ottoman, and there are these 2 women that used to have coffee with Widow Hankins, and they're like, I've had my eye on that ottoman for years, right? And they get into a bidding war, and it keeps getting higher and higher and higher until someone winds up paying $700 for a piece of furniture you could have got on eBay for $30, right? And that's what you've got to avoid with making these tender offers. Yeah, it's fine to keep raising the offer to try to get to that magic number, but if you run out of space before you get that many people on board, what do you need to do? Walk away, right? Now, people talk about winning an auction. Do you think the woman that paid $700 for the ottoman actually won that auction? No, she obviously lost that auction. The estate won that auction. And so my point to you is that a lot of these CEOs, they used to losing, by the way. Now, and so they get this mentality of, if I manage to buy this firm, then I've won. But if they overpay for it, have they truly won? No, what's the goal of financial management? Maximize shareholder wealth. If they overpay for it, they're obviously not winning the argument, or the this whole thing, the situation. Now, here's the next question. So I've got to reach out to Umfleet shareholders, and I could go to Mr. Umfleet and say, hey, I want to reach out to your individual shareholders. Would you please share their shareholder list with me, along with their addresses, so I can mail all these people a lovely letter explaining about how we're going to try to buy the company. Now, if Mr. Umfleet is a gentleman, he simply does not respond to my request. If he is not, he probably does something like this, right? He's not going to help me. He wants to keep his job. And so he's going to tell me where to get off. And so what am I going to do? Number one, I'm going to make a public announcement. And I'm going to put it somewhere that shareholders probably read, the Wall Street Journal. I'll also put it down on PR Newswire, which goes out to lots of different stuff. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the brokers like TD Ameritrade. So I have all of my stock in what's called street name. I don't have the certificates. It's all in my account. And TD Ameritrade is the only, so they know everybody that owns the stock in every company that they've got in their portfolio, right? And so I could just go to TD Ameritrade and say, hey, would you please let all of your shareholders of Umfleet Corp let me know, or let them know that I am trying to buy Umfleet Corp. Would you please send that out? TD Ameritrade, what are they going to say? Oh yeah, why does TD Ameritrade want to help me buy Umfleet Corp? What do they get every time someone buys or sells stock? Commission, right? Now, it's getting kind of murky as far as commissions and trading, right? But that's traditionally been the way it was. So the brokerages have always been willing to try to facilitate this. And so I really don't have to reach out to all the individual shareholders. If I hit places like TD Ameritrade, Merrill Lynch, and all these other people, I'm likely to get a huge majority of the shareholders anyway. Oh, and by the way, I'll also reach out to the pension funds and the mutual funds and let them know what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's why, even though he's not going to give me the mailing list, not really a problem. I've got other ways I can get to these people. Questions? Okay, so let's talk about some advantages. First of all, if I've managed to buy up 80% of the shares and thus 80% of the votes for Umfleet Corp, do we have to have a shareholder meeting at all? No, man, it could just be me by myself in a stall in the bathroom at the Newark Airport. By the way, the bathroom at the Newark Airport is the scariest part about the Newark Airport. If you want to know why, you can come to my office and ask. I'm not going to tell you in class. Okay, so doesn't have to be a shareholder meeting. Mr. Russell Walpole, have you been to the Newark Airport?
I was just asking you,
Have you been to the Newark Airport?
is it Arkansas?
What's that?
Is it New York in Arkansas?
Newark, New Jersey. It's right across from New York City.
Oh,
Have you been to the Newark Airport?
I've not been in the
Oh, LaGuardia is actually nicer.
Is it the JFK you're talking about?
No. Oh my goodness. So there's like 3 airports really close there. And here it is, growing up in this part of the country. So I actually went through the Newark Airport on my way to my first trip, my first study abroad trip, actually my only study abroad trip, when I was going to Budapest and Prague. And so that's where I got food poisoning, right? Okay, and we land at Newark. I had no idea where Newark was. And I'm looking out the left-hand side of the plane, I'm like, damn, boys, there's the Statue of Liberty, right? That's how close it is to New York City. You can see the Statue of Liberty from the Newark Airport. You can see it from the other side, too. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's all right there. But for some reason, the Newark Airport is especially heinous. Okay, back to the story. If you learn nothing else today, don't transit through the Newark Airport, right? Which is why it's the way it is, right? Neighborhoods where the rent is really cheap, do they tend to be the best neighborhoods? No. It's really cheap to go through Newark, so bad neighborhood, right? Okay. Back to the story. It bypasses the target management board. You know, I'm through dealing with this guy. I'm through dealing with the board members. I'm going straight to the shareholders. Now, I love this. Under disadvantages, the book says, it can be unfriendly. Oh my goodness, we call this a hostile takeover. Hostile is a little more than unfriendly, right? It's hostile because he obviously doesn't want to sell. His board obviously doesn't want to sell. And so we're obviously going to be adversaries in this process. Oh, and by the way, as soon as I go out to the shareholders and make this tender offer, he's going to get on CNBC. You guys know what CNBC is? Business television? If you don't know, you need to know. Okay, he's going to get on there and he's going to talk to Maria Bartiromo. Is she still around? Maria Bartiromo? Yeah, she actually, okay, back to the story. And she's going to say, so we hear someone's made an offer for Umfleet Corp. And here's exactly what he's going to say. Are you ready? Because you may need to practice this for yourself later on. Well, we certainly appreciate that people have noticed the value that we are creating at Umfleet Corp. But we think, number one, the offer vastly undervalues our firm. That's the first lie. How do we know it's a lie? Yeah, I offered him 25. His company's only worth 20, right? Lie number one. Number two, we feel that we can bring more value to the customer as a standalone firm. We fully believe in our plan for developing shareholder value. If you remember back to chapter 6, it's the expectation of the future cash flows. And so it doesn't matter how far out we're going. In other words, the market doesn't believe in his plan. If the market believed in his plan, it would already be selling for more than $25 per share, but it's not. By the way, who do you think has a better idea of what's going on here, the market or Mr. Umfleet? The market. Let me give you an example. So Amazon, I like to listen to music on Amazon. What's Amazon done lately? What's the change? You guys listen? So used to, they had this subset of songs, and you could say, and I could tell you quite a few of my favorites here, but one of them was The Great White Buffalo by Ted Nugent. I listen to that every morning before lecture to get myself charged up. Okay, so at 1976, Dallas Memorial Auditorium. Back to the story. So I used to be able to ask for that, and they would play it because it was one of the limited songs that I could get for free because I'm way cheap. Okay, now they came out a while back, and they said, and this is like a few days ago, and they said, now we're going to make our entire music catalog available. So even cheapskates like Haggard can listen to any song he wants to. But after we play the song that he wants, we're going to make him listen to a bunch of other crap too. Okay, now let's talk about why, and this is what Amazon thought, that they were incentivizing people to go ahead and pay for the upcharge plan. Immediately, Amazon stock drops by 4%. Do you think, by the way, why would they do that? You know all that other stupid crap they're going to try to make me listen to? They have to pay royalties for each and every one of those songs. They're going to punish me in a way that costs them money? That's so dumb. I mean, just us sitting in the room, we could figure out that this was a bad idea. And then they announce it, and immediately the share price goes down by 4%. Now that lets us know that the market knows better than Amazon. Amazon thought this was a value creator. The market says no. Now, here's the next question. Are we really talking about this thing being worth 4% drop in Amazon's value? Probably not. But it tells us more than just Amazon's going to be wasting their money on these royalties. It tells us that Amazon is making bad decisions, right? And if they did this stupid crap, what else kind of dumb stuff are they planning to do? And so what do? I vote with my feet. I sell my stock. Does that make sense? Okay. So unfriendly. And a significant minority of the shareholders might hold out. And if I end up with less than 80%, then I'm going to end up paying taxes on those dividends. And finally, even if I succeed, now we have to go back and do the merger that we talked about earlier in order to complete this thing. And so this is basically all about, the acquisition of stock is all about getting the votes that I need in order to to be able to do the merger. That's what it's really about. Questions?
Just the 80% one, I'm a little like.
You don't understand? Okay. So if I go out and buy 100% of the shares of another firm, then it's considered a consolidated subsidiary of my firm by the taxing authority. And then the tax flows within the company are not taxed. Or the cash flows within the company are not taxed. Only cash flows between companies and between people are taxed. And so the government says, okay, well, we recognize if you go out there and buy 80% of the shares in a company, basically for all intents and purposes, that is an unconsolidated subsidiary of your firm. And so the cash flows between that unconsolidated subsidiary and your firm are intra-company, not inter-company, and therefore they are not taxable. And so that's the benefit of getting at least 80%, is you don't have to pay taxes on the money that you receive from that new subsidiary. Whereas if we got 79%, then all the dividends that came to us, we would have to then pay taxes. Other questions? Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to contact all the shareholders and you're trying to bid, do you buy it bit by bit, like as you keep offering them, higher prices, or you wait until you make sure you have enough shares?
Oh, okay, this is a good question. And so what we're actually asking people, oh, this thing's lost its mind again. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're actually reaching out to these people, and we're saying, will you sell for $25? And then people say yes or no, right? And we add it up, and we say, yeah, we only got 60% of the shares. And so now we go back to the same people, and we say, are you interested? And so it's not a matter of, I suppose you could go out and offer $25 and let people go ahead and sell, and then if you needed to offer more down the road. What would that do to the people that you bought for $25? Where they suddenly, they're stuck with a winner's curse. And so if I do that, then I have to be careful, because now people might say, I'm going to hold out and see if I can get $27.50. Does that make sense? And so I'm going to keep going out to this, and so I'm going to end up paying everybody the same for their shares. Oh, one thing I didn't tell you though, and that is, before I make any announcement whatsoever, I'm going to set up a bunch of LLCs that are owned by my corporation. And I'm going to use these LLCs to go out there and buy up shares in the company. Now, why am I doing it through a bunch of different companies? If I go out there as Haggard Corp and start buying up the shares of Umfleet Corp, what's going to happen? You think anyone's going to get wise to what I'm doing? Yeah. And so the United States government says when on the day that you go past 5%, you have to report your holdings and you have to announce your intentions, right? Kind of like when a guy comes to your house to date your daughter, you ask him what his intentions are, right? And so you have to announce your intentions. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I want to very quietly and silently work my way up to this 5% stake. And I'm going to keep myself at 4.999999999%. And then on the last day, I am going to buy every share that I can. Now, why do I want to do that? Because if I buy the shares prior to the announcement, I can get them for a lower price. Does that make sense? Because the word isn't out. I can get them for $20. Now, as word starts to get out, someone's buying up shares of Umfleet Corp. What do you think is going to happen to the price of Umfleet Corp's shares? Yeah, it's going to start to go up. And so I paid $20 for my first shares. I paid $20.50 for the second day, and $21 the third day. But I'm still way below the $25 that I offered this guy. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get to 4.99999%. And then I'm going to do a blowout and try to buy every share that I can. And at the end of that trading day, then I have to make my report to the SEC and say, we at Haggard Corp are taking a stake in Umfleet Corp with the intention of, and in this case, I'm going to have to say with the intention of acquiring the company. And then I make the first tender offer, right? What do you think immediately happens to the share price of Umfleet Corp? Right? If I'm offering 25, shares may go to 26. Why? What do people assume is going to happen? I'm going to have to come back for another round, right? They think this is his first offer. right? It'll probably go for higher than that. And so people are willing to bet that if they buy it at 26, they can sell it at 27, 27.50. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is how, let's see, I don't even know how we got there. But that's basically how this thing works. Did that answer your question? Very good. Okay, now let's assume that I am unable to get the shareholders 2/3 or greater or 3/4 or greater, whatever it is, to approve this. I can still I can make an offer to buy the assets of Fleet Corp. What are the assets? The corporate headquarters, the factories, the intellectual property. I can make an offer to buy those, and that's only, you only have to have 50% plus 1 to get that to work. And so as long as I can get 50% plus 1 of the shareholders to agree with me, then I can do this acquisition of assets. But here's the problem. When I do that, I have to do this retitling of assets that we talked about earlier. Mr. Scott, when you bought your car and you went down to the DMV to get your title, was that a pleasant experience? No. They make you sit in that room, and I don't know why it is, but the weirdest people in Springfield are always at the DMV. And like, they sit in checkerboard fashion. And so there's never more than one empty seat. And so you're forced to sit, you have to choose the least weird one to sit by, right? And then you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and then they call you up and treat you like crap. Does that sound about right? Okay, very good. Okay, now, imagine if I were to do that for a car rental company. We're talking about 2,000, 3,000 cars, and we're going to have to do that for each and every one of the cars. That's huge. That's something we really want to avoid. If we do acquisition of assets, we have to do that. And so at first it might sound like this is a really good thing to do, but on the other hand, it's going to be very difficult for us legally because we're going to have to retitle all these assets. Now there is a benefit to it though. I'm not getting the employees with the assets. I'm not getting the employees with the assets. Let's talk about the car rental company. Do you think the people at the Hertz rental car company know, and they're all at the same airports, right? And they can see each other from their counters. Do you think these folks know which one of these people are worthwhile and which ones are not? Oh, you're kidding. You haven't been able to walk into a restaurant and see who the slacker is just immediately?
I definitely
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's probably because you're the slacker, Mr. Fisher, right? Okay. So you walk in, and so the person that always shows up late, the person that always shows up stoned, I mean, these are the people that it's really easy for the employees at the other counter. So my employees know something about my target employees. So here's what I want to do. If I just buy the assets, then the target company has to take care of those employees. They have to fire them and all that kind of crap. And then what can I do? I can make offers to select employees and bring them on board. I don't have to fire anybody. On the other hand, if I do a merger, then I'm responsible for hiring the slackers. Because after all, I've got 4 people at my counter, there's 4 people at this counter. After we merge, do you think we need 8 people at the counter? No, that's one of the rationales for mergers and acquisitions, is that we're going to be able to reduce the head count, right? And so that's the benefit to me, other than the simple majority, that's the benefit of acquisition of assets. Any questions?